Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Tuesday, October 13th, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. The Royals season finished 2 weeks ago, but there's still plenty to discuss about a team that improved over the previous 2 years from a winning percentage standpoint. Beat writer Lynn Worthy joins me to discuss what's happening with the organization's minor league players in a year where there was no minor league season, and what went right and wrong about the Royals' 2020 season. We take a look ahead at some of the offseason decisions facing General Manager Dayton Moore and manager Mike Matheny. So here we go with Lynn Worthy. Hey, Lynn, we haven't talked since the end of the Royals season. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, watching a little bit of playoff baseball and just trying to keep an eye out on what the future may hold for these Royals.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I've been impressed with the Tampa Bay Rays. They and almost as a model for a small market team to the way they go about their business. Not a lot of stars, but a lot of just terrific players who do the fundamentals well. They pitch well. They're kind of interesting to watch.
Yeah, and the pitching is the big thing to me. Just, throughout the playoffs, you've seen a lot of it, but Tampa Bay is definitely one of those teams where they've got a couple of starters that are, they're linchpins, and then the bullpen, they've got a lot of guys that can get used a lot of different ways, and seem to be able to, piece it together from night to night. And it reminds me of, sort of what we saw Matheny doing this season, just in terms of being able to use different guys in different roles and try to, if you got to get 5 innings and be creative and trying to piece that together and keep a game within reach. You'd like to not have to do that in, the first month of the season,
Right,
but
right, exactly.
you'd like that to be more of a playoff thing. But yeah, I think that's, you know, um, just an example of how things can come together with a team that's not going to be able to go out and just buy free agents every offseason.
Exactly. And the Royals are one of those types of teams. But the Royals are doing something. They're being proactive with their minor leaguers, which you wrote about today. There's a story posted on the Stars website today that you'll find in the show notes and, of course, on kansascity.com. Headline is Royals making most of chance to work with their minor leaguers and build toward the future. They are. It was such an odd place for baseball this year to not have minor league baseball. So the Royals are just seem to be doing what they can to create a minor league baseball environment, or have been really through the summer and now into the fall. Create the minor league baseball environment for its prospects. Over 100 of them. Tell us what the Royals are doing, what they've done, and what they're doing, what they hope to get out of this.
Yeah, so I think it starts with the alternate site, which I'm sure people are aware of. That while the baseball season was going on, there was the alternate site for Kansas City that was, T-Bone Stadium in Kansas City, Kansas, where you had about 30 guys who weren't on the big league roster, but who were staying in shape, training, practicing, doing inter squad scrimmages, trying to be as baseball ready as possible for their duration of the season, just doing it sort of in a closed site, like I said, at T-Bone's ballpark, where they were working with, basically the minor league staff, player development staff, on a daily basis. And but of course, that's only, if you had when you had a 30-man major league roster, then there was only 30 guys over there. When it was 28, then it was 32 over there. But either way, it's a small chunk of the minor leaguers that you have in your system. So once they got the okay from Major League Baseball to have a fall instructional league, then they put the plans in motion where as soon as the season ended, then the fall camp started. So they had a fall camp that's still ongoing in Kansas City at the Kauffman Stadium now, where they put together 2 teams. A lot of them are guys who are at the alternate site, but then also other minor leaguers who've been working out on their own this offseason. And when I say on their own, they've also been in contact with their hitting, pitching managers, hitting coaches, pitching coaches, managers, instructors. But they've been doing it, without hands-on. They've been doing it in their separate locations. A lot of them spread throughout the globe, not just around the country.
Right.
So you run in some of those guys, and so then you have 2 teams of 25, 50 guys in Kansas City playing games and having basically an abbreviated season for these minor leaguers who didn't have a season. On top of that, you also have another 70 guys, at least initially. I think it's numbers have grown a little bit just with some injuries. They've added some more guys, but um, 70 guys who went to Arizona to have camp there, where they've got two teams there that they're playing games against other teams, other organizations who've got facilities in Arizona, and again having the minor league season that they haven't had. Those guys just started playing games a week ago and are now in their second week of gameplay, and they're going to be in Arizona until November 20th. I believe the games will only go to the 13th, and that last week is going to probably be more of a camp week and exit interviews and the sort of this is what we're looking for you to do into the off season type thing. But so yeah, you've got 120 minor leaguers who aren't 40-man roster guys who haven't had a season. Who at most some of them have had alternate site training and inter squads. Who are now getting to be on teams, to have sort of a gameplay setting, to be working with their coaches and staff hands on. And it's something that I know General Manager Dayton Moore has been big on. Have they had to have this? JJ Piccolo, who's in charge of the minor league system, assistant general manager, talked a long time about how this was something that they were looking forward to, that they needed to have, that they were planning for when they didn't know for sure they were going to have it. And so now that's getting up and running.
I thought one of the interesting quotes from Dayton, or one of his thoughts, was that throughout the country and throughout baseball, there were players of all ages in organized games. In the pandemic environment, maybe without fans and distanced and all the things that we were doing in the pandemic, but not minor league baseball players. There was no organized games for them over the summer, and so the Royals seem to be doing everything they can to continue their development in a way that's been disrupted for because of the pandemic and excuse me, and baseball's rules about minor league baseball now. It's just going to be it's just a different system going forward, isn't it? It's not going to be minor league baseball the way we knew it, with so many teams for each franchise.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. I mean, the contraction in the minor leagues is gonna, you're not gonna have so many guys, especially at that lower level. Like, I remember it was described to me in the past as a sort of a pyramid, where at the base there's this large group of lower level prospects who you got so many levels of A ball, whether it's short season or rookie league, and all these guys who are at that base of that pyramid. But then as you get up to double A, where it starts to narrow and there's only one double A team and then there's only one triple A team, that's sort of the way that you look at player development. Is the opportunities start to get fewer as you climb and get higher up that pyramid. Well, the base of that pyramid is going to get smaller now, just because of the numbers shrinking, and there's not going to be so many short season teams. There's not going to be a lot of it's going to get done out of their spring training facilities as opposed to in actual leagues. So yeah, that's going to look a lot different. But this year, a lot of those guys just didn't. I mean, it didn't matter where you were on the pyramid. A lot of guys just didn't have any place to play this year. And when Dayton originally started saying that, it was Major League Baseball still hadn't given the okay to or given the signed off on what the minor league season was going to be, and Dayton was really frustrated at the time and sort of speaking out about the fact that, like, hey, you know, they're playing baseball all over this country, and Major
Right.
League Baseball has a season going, and the minor leaguers are just sort of left out. So I think he was really speaking out of frustration and sort of saying, "Let's get this thing going here," because it wasn't until I believe it was might have even been September 1st when that memo went out reportedly to the major league team saying, yes, it's okay for the fall season, and this is what the stipulations are going to be. So all that time in between, minor leaguers didn't know what they were going to be doing. And, I mean, as people probably know, Dayton Moore has a son who's playing college baseball who, so he's seen it firsthand where there's college players who are out playing. And you talk to other people who are involved with baseball. They've got, children playing little league who were playing this summer, high school teams doing fall ball. Like there's a lot of stuff going on. And once you got past a certain point, Major League Baseball still wasn't hadn't given the sign off on what they were going to do for the minor leaguers. So I think there was a little bit of frustration and probably a feeling that they were dragging their feet. My words, not Dayton's, but Dayton was pretty adamant about what he thought.
Yeah, and some of those thoughts are why some people want Dayton to be have a national position in baseball, right? Could even possibly be a commissioner candidate someday. He just supports the game in a public way, and is a champion really of baseball. So, okay, hey Lynn, let's take a break here. We talk about what we saw from the Royals this season and what the off season will be about for this organization. So we'll be right back. Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Okay, we're back with Lynn Worthy, the beat writer, covers the Royals for the Kansas City Star. And all right, Lynn, let's just really quickly sum up what 2020 baseball for the Royals was. They finished 26-34, fourth in the division, ahead of the Tigers. I guess for the second straight year, they finished fourth. The winning percentage was their best in 3 years, 458, and that kind of equates to a 70 victory season over 162 games. But keep in mind, they only played AL Central and NL Central teams this year, and they were, I guess, 6 games out of the final playoff spot, or 6 games behind the Toronto Blue Jays, which got the final playoff spot in the American League. So I think we can safely say that progress was made this year. It was a step in the right direction, and there's a bit of momentum that the Royals can take from this season into next. Am I right on that?
Yeah, it was a step. It was progress from the back-to-back 100 loss seasons. I mean, I think and if you break, I mean, you can always break seasons up into different segments and take what you want out of a certain segment. But they did finish pretty strong. They played, which is sort of an anomaly in a season like this, but I think they played more games against teams that were above 500 than just about anybody else in baseball. I think it was. Um, and really they were, again, looking at it in segments, but I think it was like if they had just played 500 ball against the White Sox, then they would have been 500 for the season because they went like 1-9 against Chicago for
Right.
whatever reason. And, and I know they had a couple of games that they lost on walk offs there, and I think Salvi might have missed some of those games. And but for whatever, I mean, it's baseball. Stuff happens over the course of a season, even a short season. So, but yeah, so they were 1-9. So if you make that a 5-5 instead of a 1-9, then I think that brings them up to like a 500 team, for whatever that's worth. But yeah, I think there's definitely strides made from the last couple seasons where you just knew at a certain point that it wasn't it was going to be a development year in a 162 game schedule. Whereas
Exactly.
this year they were still, mathematically in the running up until like the last week. Um, and that's after probably, trading away some guys that might have been able to help down the stretch because they just weren't close enough where they felt like they could afford to lose guys and not get something back for them, like a Trevor Rosenthal, and people like that. So definitely steps made. You saw young guys like the pitchers, and particularly Brady Singer, Kris Bubic, get their first taste of Major League Baseball and perform pretty well. You saw probably some guys. You answered some questions, or at least got a look at some guys as far as what you might do next year around the field and the everyday lineup. Um, but still, some questions to be answered. I mean,
Sure.
and um,
Oh,
things.
we'll get to those. Oh yeah,
Yes.
I got a list. I got a
Yeah,
list.
yeah, and you saw Salvi back, Salvador Perez. Coming. I think it's the break almost makes you forget that the year before he missed the entire year and he came off Tommy John, and it was this question about how is he going to look coming off Tommy John, and he got over the hump as far as getting to age 30, and now it's like, okay, he's coming off surgery, he's starting to get, not old but getting up there a little bit. So what's this going to look like? And he hit from the beginning and hit all the way through. And if not for the time when he literally couldn't see, he would have been hitting then too. So,
Yeah, no, you're right. He led the still. I think he ended up leading the team in home runs with 11, and in batting average 333. I mean, gosh, if he had to miss the chunk of games, I think he played in 37 of the 60. If he plays 10, 12 more games, he probably qualifies for league leadership in some of these categories. He just swung the bat. There were games toward the end of the season where I just thought, he's going to put good wood on this, and he did. He was. It's the best I've ever seen him hit for that stretch after he came back. He was just terrific, and boy, I hope for the Royals that carries over. But you mentioned the young arms, Brady Singer and Kris Bubic, especially. Let's go to the bullpen, and this was a spot in the Royals that I think they were second to last in ERA the previous year, and they were eighth this year. I mean, what a great turnaround for that group, that collection in the bullpen, and there's a decision the Royals are going to have to make, I guess, with pending free agents, right? With some of the bullpen arms.
yeah, I mean, you'll have Greg Holland is going to be a free agent. You'll have Ian Kennedy, who didn't pitch particularly well this year after having a great season in 2019, be a free agent. You'll have, and obviously Trevor Rosenthal was traded away, but so those three were so your veteran, all guys who had closed games, all experienced guys, all star types. Kennedy hadn't been an all star, but the other two had been his closers. So all three of them potentially could be gone. They've expressed. It seems like they've expressed interest in potentially having Trevor Rosenthal come back. Definitely Greg Holland come back. I think they. I mean, depending on the situation, they might even be interested in having Kennedy come back, because Kennedy's already said that because he's up there, he's in the same age range as Gordo. I think he's a year younger. But he's said that he plans to continue playing, so he could be a guy that maybe potentially comes back as well. But with the performance that Rosenthal had, it could be a bidding war type situation, and that probably doesn't bode well for them.
Right.
Um, but he's a Lee Summit guy, a guy who's had history with Mike Matheny, a guy who even at the trade deadline before he got traded was pretty clear about the fact that he wanted to stay in Kansas City. So there's hope there, but again, if it gets into a bidding war, it's probably not very likely. Um, and then you've got the young guys who you've got under control, which is, maybe the most encouraging part is you've got, guys like Scott Barlow, who seemed like he was pitching just about every day for a stretch there.
Right.
He's pitched well. He's a guy who's under control. You got Josh DeMont, who just comes in throwing, 100 miles an hour, and who's looked really good at times, and definitely looked like he made some big improvements from the year before, where he was sort of command was all over the place. You get Kyle Zimmer, who's really started to come into his own and settle in as a bullpen guy and a reliable bullpen guy who's still under control. Tyler Zuber, rookie, looked really good at times. At times had sort of those Greg Holland outings where he might put two guys on, three guys on, and then still get out of the inning.
Yeah.
And who's just in his first year. So I mean, there's other guys too. I mean, Jake Newberry's looked good at times. Matt Harvey, they sort of moved into the bullpen, but then he got injured. So, I mean, there's a lot of guys. Jesse Hahn looked really good. He came back from the elbow injury, pitched at the end of last season, got a little bit of time in September, and then this year full time in the bullpen. Looked really good, almost potential closer type. I mean, he closed some games at the end of the season, so there's a lot of guys that they know they have, and then there's guys that you're going to have to make some decisions on, and maybe have to try and fight for through free agency. But there's enough there that makes you think that bullpen could be strong going forward.
Okay, let's look at we mentioned we were talking about Salvador Perez. I was telling you I hadn't seen a hotter bat by Salvi, and certainly he was on fire for a couple of weeks there. But here I'm looking at Alberto Mondesi's stat line on in game 49. After game 49, he was hitting 203. After game 60, he hits 256. You talk about an incredibly hot bat. I think I saw a tweet by a stat freak after the season that Mondesi had either one of the greatest weeks of hitting in Royals history, and just in terms of batting average and numbers, the way he finished the season was so encouraging. But look, he got off to such a lousy start, and we were spent a lot of the season just wondering about him, and was he going to, was he ever going to develop into the player we all expected him to? And then he showed in the last couple of weeks just what the potential is, and maybe even went beyond that a little bit. So, did the last couple of weeks really alter your perception of Mondesi, and and change the way you feel about him going forward?
I mean, I don't think it changed my feeling of him, just because I think we all, or if you've been around long enough and and seen enough of him, you knew that that potential was there. You just weren't sure, you know, from how consistent he was going to be, which is always the question when you got a guy
Right.
who's shown the potential. Previously, I think the issue had been, is he going to stay healthy enough to show it? And so this year, health wasn't the issue; it was just the actual performance, or at least as far as we know, health wasn't the issue. I mean, we asked multiple times because obviously he came off of shoulder surgery that ended his previous season, and then rehabbed it, and then his spring training was sort of out of whack because he was working out in spring training, and he did some stuff on the field, even some like almost inter squad simulated game type stuff. But he never actually got into a game before they left Arizona. So he rehabbed and he took part in spring training, but he never played a spring training game. And then they had the 3 months off, and then came back for the spring training 2.0. And he never let that be an excuse. And we asked him about it multiple times, but he never really let on that that had anything to do with his timing or anything like that. Um, but so I don't think it changed seeing what he did late in the season, because I think we all knew he could do that. It still sort of leaves you with the question, because of the first half of the season, is where is he going to be on a regular basis between that Jekyll and Hyde that we saw this
Right.
year. 'Cause I mean, that second half of the season, like that's the guy that, when you hear them talk about, I think in July, Dayton Moore dropped the word star, superstar, that's what this guy was going to be. And that's when you see that last 29 games, that's the type of thing that they're talking about. A guy who's hitting, 300 with 6 home runs and 20 RBIs and stole, 17 bases. I mean, like this is all in like a 29 game span, and he just was, everything. I mean, he was taking walks and extra bases and everything else. And the whole season he did play really good defense. I mean, like he made some plays when he was hitting, a buck 75, whatever. He made some defensive plays certain nights that made you stop and sort of be in awe. So I mean, I think that maybe is the one consistent thing that you saw, was that defense that people talked about, and which is why part of the reason that they've called him a 5 tool guy. Um, but the offense, it's still, like I say, it didn't change. It just still leaves you with the same question, just in more of a stark contrast between the first 30 games and the last 29.
Right. Right. Well, look, he's those the second half of the season was just phenomenal, especially the last, like I said, the last couple of weeks, and then that was look, it changed the Royals were headed for last place, and probably a record that would not have been much of an improvement from a winning percentage over the previous year. But his heating up at the end, they ended up winning four of their last five and five of their last eight, something like that, and beating the Cardinals and the Tigers. So it made a big difference for the Royals when he played the way that he did. The other thing that one of the other encouraging players that I noticed was Franchi Cordero, um, and it came over right. It was it the Tim Hill trade that brought him to the
Yep,
Royals.
that's
Okay,
correct.
and I'm thinking this might be the left fielder, the Alex Gordon replacement. Do you think the Royals are thinking that way?
Yeah, he's definitely one of the candidates. He's when Dayton Moore was asked about that late in the season. I can't remember if it was at the end of the season or it might have been. It might even have been when we were talking about Gordo's retirement and where they're going to turn after that. One of the first names off of his mouth was off of his lips was Franchi Cordero, and so and he's a guy who they've been interested in for a while, for multiple years, and I mean just athletically and in terms of just like tools. This guy is he's just an athlete and a guy who he's got power. He's got he's speed. He's above average in a lot of different categories. They feel like he's got a hit tool that still is developing. Um, the thing with him with San Diego is, you look and he's been one of their guys who's been one of the highly thought of prospect in years past. He just had injury issues that sort of derailed him and kept him from being consistent in the past. But they feel like he definitely can be a guy who, if he continues to make those strides, could be an everyday guy, maybe take over that spot in left field. Um, but again, this year with him, he's a guy that he got a little bit of a shot early in the season, and the results were sort of mixed. And then you come to find out that he had a hand thing, and they ended up having to do the hamate procedure, and so you didn't see him again until the end of the season. And then he looked pretty good at the end of the season. He had the game where he came out and hit two home runs, and I mean he hit Solaire type home runs. I mean these weren't
Right, right.
cheapies. These were and they were
Crushed
at
him.
Kaufman, yeah. And so it's one of those things where you wonder if it's going to be one of those guys who's always sort of giving you those peaks at what he could be, and then is he going to have injury issues, which they've seen in the past, or is he going to be consistent? But there's definitely a lot there to be at least excited about the potential of what he could be.
Okay, so what do you think? What are the big questions for the Royals? What issues do they need to solve going into next season? I'm not sure that people will look at next season as a playoff potential team, but just to keep the team on the right track and to continue to see them develop and make progress. Where do the Royals need to improve?
Well, one thing that will be interesting to see is do they decide that Whit Merrifield is finally an everyday outfielder as opposed to the guy who gets moved around? And that question, something I'd written about a couple weeks ago, is gonna rely on a couple of things, partially on Mondesi, because if Mondesi can hit consistently, then you can afford to have Nicky Lopez, who's hitting is sort of lag behind where it's been in the minors, but who's been really good, who's been tremendous defensively.
Right.
You can afford to carry him, even if his bat is maybe scuffling a little bit. If Mondesi's doing what he did at the end of the season, then it doesn't Nicky's bat doesn't really matter as much as long as he's giving you high caliber defense, and then that gives you that Salvi, Nicky, Mondi up the middle defense that you'd love to have in baseball. That up the middle, and those three are that's as far as a shortstop, second base, catcher. That's a heck of a group right there, just based off what they've been able to do defensively. Um, if that's the case, then you can say, okay, well, what's going to be an everyday outfielder, and maybe you put him in right field, and Hunter Dozier played a lot of first base down the stretch, and then that's you get yourself more of almost a set lineup. Whereas the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of guys sort of moving in and out of spots and playing multiple positions as opposed to having set positions. Um, but if Mondi is going to do what he did in that first half of that season, then they're going to probably be saying, well, we need every bit of offense we can out of these positions, and that means that Witt's going to be playing more second, and then you got to figure out what else you got for options in the outfield. Um, so that to me, that's one of the questions. Be interested to see what they settle on and how they settle on that. And again, that relies on a couple other positions. Um, Again, the Hunter Dozier, whether he's going to be a full time first baseman, which down the stretch that looked pretty good.
Yeah,
That
right.
looked pretty good, and we've seen his production offensively. This year was sort of a disjointed year for him. He had the COVID, which put him back, and then he's admitted, that when he came back, he was still feeling effects of that, where he just, he wasn't feeling as strong, and he had the shortness of breath and everything like that, even after he got back to the big league club. Um, the pitching, as much as everybody wants to, sort of fast forward to a place where you've got all these young pitching prospects in the rotation, I sort of caution, I guess, against that, just in the fact that we only saw a abbreviated season for Bubic and Singer, and um, you know, teams nowadays have been pretty careful about the innings limits and how teams elevate those from year to year. I don't know that you're going to be able to count on a full season of that next year, and anybody you bring up who you think is going to slot into that rotation is going to have done alternate site and then maybe this fall ball, and then you're going to
Yeah,
look for 200 innings out of these guys next year. I don't think that's realistic. Asked Dayton about that at the end of the season. He gave you the old, we're not going to put limitations on our guys, but um, I think in the past we've seen them actually put limitations on guys. I mean, I think we've seen them shut down Brad Keller and Jacob Junis at the end of the previous season. So
right, right.
I think that's a question mark that people want to already make plans for what their rotation is going to be with all these young guys, and I think that's going to have to wait just because of the situation this year and the fact that they didn't get those innings, and you're not going to take a guy from I'm trying to remember what Bubic ended up with, but I think Bubic ended up with 50 innings this year,
He did right at
and
50.
right at 50, and Singer was like closer to
He
70.
led the team at 64 and a third.
Yeah, and so next year we're saying they're going to be what 170. I don't
Yeah,
know
it's
if
tough. You're
that's
right. That's a that would be quite a jump for
yeah.
those arms.
Yeah, so I think people who want to sort of like move Junis to the bullpen and say, well, maybe Montgomery, who had missed most of this year, is a full time bullpen guy. It's like, well, maybe, but where are you getting the rest of these innings? That's that's one
Yeah,
be one
no,
of those
that's
big
right.
questions for me. And if you bring up, you want to bring up people, obviously look at Jackson Kowar, Daniel Lynch. People already want to make the jumps with Asa Lacy, who pitched I think a month of a college season this year, and then got drafted, and then has been at the alternate site for he was at the alternate site since I want to say they brought him up there in August at some point. So you can't start projecting these guys to the start. I mean to their starting rotation, and just to me you can't, but people will. But to me you
Right.
can't. So that means you're gonna that you'll still have to rely on a lot of some of these guys that you've been relying on the last couple of years, whether that's Junis or Montgomery. Obviously Brad Keller looked really good this year. Um, Danny Duffy, who would be in final year of his deal next year. So I mean that's uh, how the pitching staff, the starting rotation, how they manage that next year will be very interesting to me. And I think whether they still feel like they need to go out and try and add some depth to that group, some innings to that group this offseason will be interesting because this offseason, adding in general this offseason is going to be a big question mark because teams just, they took a hit this year financially. And to say that they're going to go out and spend in free agency, I'm not sure what that's going to look like for anybody, let alone the Royals.
Right. That's a good point. That's a good point. Well, all these questions for the Royals in an increasingly difficult division. We saw what the White Sox did this year, and so and three of the teams, of course, made the playoffs out of the Central. All right, let's leave it here, Lynn. There's so much more we can talk about, and so we will in a future podcast. And then a lot of decisions that the Royals have to make after the World Series. Baseball decisions get a lot of decisions get made, so we'll be paying attention then. So, Lynn, great catching up with you, and we will talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
That'll do it for today. Thanks to our production staff of Derek Donovan, Randy Mason, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, Kris Fickett, and Savannah Smith. Tip of the cap to Lynn Worthy, who stopped by and talked Royals. His stories can be found in the show notes and on kansascity.com. Hey, we got another deal for you, especially for those who want to deep dive into the Stars' terrific Chiefs coverage. For a limited time, you can subscribe to Sports Pass for 99 cents a month. That's right, 99 pennies a month. After 3 months, it auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless you cancel. How do you get that? You go to kansascity.com/SportsPass2020. That's kansascity.com/SportsPass2020. And do you want more than just sports coverage? I do. Check out the entire Kansas City Star product, sports news, features, commentary, and analysis. You get all the stories written by my talented colleagues, plus additional news, sports, and business coverage with the e-edition. Those details can be found at account.kansascity.com/subscribe. Look, if you're having trouble hunting down these offers, just send me an email at bkerkhoff@kcstar.com, and I'll get you to the right place. Whether it's a sports pass or the full subscription, you're getting and supporting the best sports and news coverage in Kansas City and helping us produce programs like SportsBeat KC. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back on Wednesday with another episode.